Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to a early afternoon broadcast here on the Comic Art Live channel. We've got a special guest today, somebody who's been very, very busy of late and is a workaholic like me. So he's got several projects going on. Mr. Patrick McDonnell from MUTTS fame. So let me bring Patrick in, and he's actually at a unique location right now that we're going to be talking about in a little bit. But welcome to the show, Patrick.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me. Happy to be.
It's my pleasure. I had forgotten, and then when somebody came in to me and mentioned that you were interested in coming back on the show, you actually were on a broadcast that we did about 3 years ago on George Harriman. I don't know if you remember that, but we had Glenn Gold, Rob Stolzer, and Mike Tisserand, just for kind of a roundtable about Harriman's work, and it was fun. Just getting to chat about a creator. I could tell, really just knowing a little bit about your background, you definitely have an affinity for the cartoonists and illustrators that came before you.
Oh, yeah, no. I mean, Herman was a major influence. For me, it was Charles Schulz when I was a little kid growing up. Peanuts was everything to me. And then in my teen years, they did a reproduction of Crazy Cat, which I had never heard before. And that blew my mind. And it still blows my mind every time I look at that strip. That strip, it's timeless. It's still ahead of the curve, this strip. It's just fantastic. And Seagar's Popeye. Yeah, I'm a fan of all those early comic strips. And I think I do remember that interview now, but that was probably during COVID and everything. Everything's a blur those years.
Yeah, definitely. It was late 2020 or early 2021, but yeah, we were all looking for something to do, and so yeah, we had that get together, and it was fun. Yeah, honestly, I after that kind of roundtable, I really felt like it would be fun to get back and do more of those. And honestly, I think that's about the only one where we really focused on an illustrator and dedicated 2 hours to them. I'm reminded that I really should try to figure out how to do those more often, because it was fun. It was very educational, and I'd like to think that people who weren't really familiar with Harriman's Crazy Cat learned a little bit, and hopefully maybe picked up one of the trades or whatnot. After the show, I picked up 2 of them. That they're just fantastic to see, and they really figure that's over 100 years ago, where the medium is just really beginning and being invented for comic and illustration and daily strip art. Harriman was doing it. I mean, sometimes it's an interesting era that I think a lot of collectors and fans don't think about.
Well, what's great about nowadays is all those old comic strips. You can get every strip they ever did, all these complete collections. When we did our Crazy Cat book, that was, I think, 1986, and there was only one other Crazy Cat book you could get, and that was out of print. But today, my God, there's probably hundreds of Crazy Cat books.
There are. He's finally, and there's not enough of his work out there, but clearly a lot of collectors have finally kind of caught on to his work, and those oversized Sundays are just absolutely amazing, right? And I'm in hopes of one day getting just a spot illustration. Would be really fun to have. Just again, a piece of history.
Without it.
So, out of curiosity, do you collect at all? Do you have any pieces from artists? I mean, maybe a Charles Schulz Peanuts daily or something.
I've been collecting long ago enough that things were affordable. The first piece I bought was a Crazy Cat Sunday.
Really?
Yeah, it was my wife and I. Before we were even married, we purchased it together, and I think that guaranteed that we were going to married. But I have lucky to have a few Hermans. I'm a big Jack Kirby fan, so I have quite a few Jack Kirby pages. Again, back when the comic convention, you could get some of those for a halfway decent price back then. And Dick Tracy, Little Orphan Annie. Yeah, I collect quite a few things.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. So speaking of all of those, I mean, one of the, I want to kind of get into, how you became a cartoonist yourself. I know that MUTTS got started around '94, but you were working in the arts and the graphic arts prior to that, right?
Yeah, well, I always wanted to be a cartoonist ever since I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and mainly because of Peanuts. I mean, I grew up just in love with Charles Schulz's work, as every kid in the 60s did.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to get those paperbacks and read them every night before I went to bed. So that was my dream. I went to art school in New York City. I went to the School of Visual Arts, and I started getting magazine illustration work. And also that took off and kept me kind of busy. And for probably a good 10 years, I kept on saying, I gotta really try a comic strip. And even in my illustration work for magazines, a lot of my illustrations, I would do comic strips to illustrate a story. I would do a little 3-page gag. So I was kind of doing comic strips. I actually had a weekly column. I illustrated a weekly column in the New York Times, the Russell Baker column, and I used to do strips in there. So I felt like I was sneaking in a comic strip into the New York Times. But after about 10 years of illustrating, I thought it was finally time to try doing a MUTTS comic strip, and MUTTS happened. But mainly based on my.
Was it always kind of the story that you felt you would be telling through a daily was going to be involving the animals that we enjoy today?
Well, you know what happened in my illustration work, I always drew this guy with a big nose and a mustache. And I always put this little white dog with a circle around his eye hidden, or somewhere in the illustration. Mm-hmm. Finally decided to do a comic strip. I thought that little dog and the guy with the mustache being his owner could be somewhere to go. And what really put it over the top was I always wanted a dog my whole life and didn't get my first dog until I was 30. And I got it. I was drawing this little dog in my strip, but I thought it was just a generic cartoon dog. And art director told me I was drawing a Jack Russell Terrier. And this was before Jack Russells got really famous. So I had to go to the library and look up Jack Russells. And I said, oh my God, this is the cartoon I'm drawing. So I picked up a Jack Russell, and he was everything I'd want a dog to be. So I wanted the strip to be about him and try to capture some joy of life he had. And actually, Charles Schulz was the one who named him. The dog I had was Earl, but when I was doing the comic strip, I wasn't sure what to name the dog. And Charles Schulz said, "Why don't you name him after your own dog, Earl?" And I thought Sparky might have known what he was talking about. So I took his advice, and that's how my Earl became my comic Earl.
Well, I did not know that part of the story. So you knew Charles fairly well?
Well, the greatest thing about becoming a cartoonist was getting to become friends with my hero, Charles Schulz. I did in my magazine illustration for Parents Magazine, I did a monthly comic strip called Bad Baby. And there was a little collection of those, which I met this guy, Mark Cohen, who was friends with Charles Schulz, and I sent him a book to give to Charles Schulz, and had the pleasure to actually go out to California and meet him based on this Bad Baby comic. And so I did get to meet him then. Then when I started MUTTS, I showed him my initial drawings for it, and he liked it. And I tell you right there, that was enough for me. I didn't need to be in the newspapers. Charles Schulz liked it.
No, that's amazing. Well, the funny, it's not funny. I've seen a lot of, the cartoonists have always kind of had a kind of a brotherhood, right? I mean, that, you've really, I've seen numerous times where cartoonists contribute drawings to certain, cartoonists who are maybe retiring. There's so much of that artwork out there from the 50s, 60s, and 70s that it's its own kind of like subculture within the arts, that the group of people who work on, daily scripts and those sorts of things. It must be fun to be a part of that.
Oh, it's such a crazy, unique job that it's a competitive job in terms of, newspapers don't put new strips in too often. So It's a competitive job, but boy, you couldn't meet a nicer group of people. And I think because we share that same crazy job, we're all pretty close. To do a comic strip every day, it's a crazy way to make a living. So, and we all admire, the fact of work and how we draw and talk pens. And, it's a good group. I mean, that was the nice thing about Charles Schulz. I mean, for how famous he was and how much money he made and how important he was, at his heart, he was just a cartoonist. He just loved going to the National Cartoonist and sitting around with other cartoonists and talking about his favorites and pens and ink, and that's what he lived for every day, to get up and go in the studio and draw, just like the rest of us.
Well, it's definitely, on Comic Art Fans we have a lot of people who collect strip art, but it's certainly a area that I think a lot of art collectors still don't really know a whole lot about, or are turned on to collecting it, and they should be. But it's a part, when you go to regular traditional say cons for comics or whatnot, cartoonists and illustrators of dailies just aren't typically at those shows. You don't see too many of them out there, and I think that that's unfortunate. I mean, it's something that I'd love to see you at a show, right? I think it would be amazing, and I just think that we don't get the luxury of getting to meet the creators of this of a medium that we get to see and enjoy every single day. Comic book comes out every 30 days, and we have shows devoted to the creators and buyers and sellers of those products. But for those of you who work every single day, there really isn't like something dedicated to you. You guys have to do your own like annual illustrators get together to kind of celebrate the medium, and that's wrong. I really feel that, and I don't know how we can try to figure out how to work you guys into more things so that you get the recognition that you deserve. But I appreciate it.
Times have definitely changed. When I was going to the early Comic Cons, the original art was mostly newspaper stuff.
Right.
Valiant, Crazy Cat. Like, if you went to a dealer that did original art, it was mostly comic strip stuff. That's true. You look at the old catalogs, that they used to put out for cartoon art, and then there might be a few pages of some superhero stuff. It's just amazing how it totally flipped. I was just both at San Diego Con and New York Comic Con this year, and it's mostly superhero stuff. It's hard to find the comic strip stuff. And obviously there's some beautiful work, and like you said, beautiful work that these poor guys got to do every day.
Right, they are working every day too. It's just it's a monthly product, but I always forget that because I'm 56, so I kind of didn't go to my first show probably until about 1980. But I've heard from many collectors who've been collecting art and comics that in the early 70s, before Marvel and DC started letting giving the artwork back to the artists, you're right, those shows were dominated by strip art, Prince Valiants, those sorts of things, because that was all the artwork that was available to kind of change hands. And that's an interesting part of kind of our hobby, that it was very different at that time.
What's the craziest part about it, though, now? Obviously the crazy prices, but the way they show the art at these Comic Cons hasn't changed.
No.
Back in the day, Kirby page might have been $100, and they would tack it to the wall, and now those Kirby pages are $100,000, and they're still tacked to the wall.
They are.
So went to a fine art gallery, $100,000 drawings in a frame, and people are protecting it. It's just a funny way how the prices went up, but the way we display it hasn't changed. Yeah,
that is very, very, very true. Well, it's just a part of the show formats and everything. You can't really place a gallery in the middle of a show, but we're, I tell you, we're working on a show down here that, at least we're trying to elevate the arts a bit. We have a gallery setting, and we're putting art up in different ways, just to kind of get people to start thinking a little differently about it. Because you're absolutely right. When you have a $100,000 Kirby or a $6 million Frank Frazetta painting, it shouldn't be on a flat rack on the back wall behind you, where it could get blown over, or something. It's absolutely true.
But there's still something just fun about that, that it hasn't changed.
Yeah, no, all right, there, I get that, and we have somebody in the chat, Lyle. He mentions that he collects Bruce Cornwell art from the 1950s comic strips, Space Captain Jim Sawyer. Yeah, I think there's a few of those on CAF, but that's great. All that stuff is kind of harder to find these days. There aren't too many art dealers that there aren't really any art dealers that I know that focus on strip art, but as far as just mainstream comic art dealers, there aren't many that carry it. Just because it's harder to move. the sizes are different. They don't fit into a portfolio, or 11 by 7 Itoya or whatever. And so it just becomes problematic, especially the Sundays. I've got a few of those, and I have to have like an 18 by 24 inch Itoya to put those in, because there's just so large. Even like weird, like a Star Trek Sunday from the early 80s is too large to fit in most any portfolios that an average art collector is going to have.
Those sizes of those little Nemos and Prince Valiant are immense.
Exactly. So, well, enough about the history. Why don't we talk a little bit more about you? Because I know that you obviously been doing MUTTS for 30 years now, and we wanted to talk about the Guard Dog book that came out in September. I think it's going to a second print because it's been doing so well. But this is from a story that I believe was going on in 2023. It's a collected group of pieces. I don't know the length of time that the story ran, though.
It ran it started in November last year, and it ran for about 7.5 weeks.
Okay.
Probably the longest story. On occasion in the past, I've done continued stories in MUTTS, but this was definitely the longest one. And it was really fun to do, and something I've been promising to do for over 20 years. The guard dog character is a tethered chain dog and lived in a backyard his whole life. And when I first introduced him, in my sketchbook, I thought I was drawing a villain for Earl and Mooch. I figured it might be fun to have a bully that they'd have to deal with. So I started drawing, the comic cliches of a mean old dog, and made him muscular and gave him sharp teeth and put a spiked collar around him. But then after the spiked collar, I figured, I'll put a chain on him. And once I looked at that drawing in my notebook, I said, oh no, this isn't a villain. This is a tragic character. Thinking about the life of these poor dogs that live on a chain. Mm-hmm. I introduced him more as a tragic character in MUTTS to help raise awareness for tethered dogs. And, pretty soon I started getting letters from everybody saying, can you please free him? But, doing MUTTS, I get to be friendly with a lot of animal protection groups. And they all told me that we should keep him on the chain because he has a mission to get the word out and help raise awareness. So I did that for many, many years. And last year I finally decided it was time for him to go free. So it was a really fun project for me to actually share that joy with them, because I feel like I was chained for 20 years drawing this poor dog. And now I draw him free with a loving home and a loving guardian, his little friend Doozy.
Well, was there anything particular that inspired the storyline? In your life, or a story that you knew about with regards to this particular dog?
It's funny. One of the reasons it took me a long time to do was like 10 years ago, Fox Films, Fox Animation bought MUTTS to do a feature-length film. Mm-hmm. And took me about a year with my lawyers to convince them that I should write it. But I did get the chance to write it. And the story was going to be the adventure of freeing Guard Dog. So because I was going to do that in the movie, I put it on hold for the strip. But then the way Hollywood usually is, after working on it for all those years, finally with the fourth draft of the strip, it looks like it was going to happen. And then Disney bought Fox. And when that happens, everything goes on hold. So at that point, I was thinking, I'm not sure this movie's ever going to happen. So I thought it was finally time to do it in the comic strip. And I'm really glad I did because, the movie obviously was, more dramatic and a big adventure. But, the story I did in the strip was true to MUTTS and true to real stories about tethered dogs. And, what happens is this dog's owner just moves and leaves him in the backyard, which sounds crazy, but it's amazing not amazing, it's sad how many dogs are treated like that, or just abandoned. So that was the story. And he's always had this little girl, Doozy, who jumps the fence and feeds him and brings him blankets. And, she finds him, and that's the story of how he gets freed. And what was interesting, doing a daily comic strip is an interesting way to tell a story. In this day and age, everyone's used to immediate satisfaction and short attention spans.
Mhm.
But with this story, you had to wait 24 hours for 3 more panels. So, the drama of him being left alone in his backyard really lasted, a couple of weeks, which really got the readers involved because they were really concerned for him, which was really nice to see how they really bonded with the character and made the story really special.
Now, when you were working on a story like this, do you have, are there ways for the readers to kind of reach out and let you know how important the story was to them? I mean, did you know that you were working on something that was going to be this lasting and meaningful to so many people?
Well, that's what's nice. There's MUTTS.com, and we're on Instagram, and we're on Facebook. And that, it was every day we were getting hundreds and thousands of, notes from people just saying, please free him. And just the audience was really involved, which was really nice. And what was really nice too is, people sharing their own stories of guard dogs that they freed and now are loving pets. And that's one thing about dogs. It's amazing how great dogs are, that they can live lives like that, based on how cruel humans could be. But then there's humans who treat them well and they respond so fast and, forgive and forget and become great dogs. And in this book, I'll give a little plug. Here's the guard dog book. But
And it is. I have a link in the show description for people to go over to the MUTTS website so they can check out that book and then the other book that we'll be talking about as well. But I read through the story the other day, and I'm reminded, when I grew up, my father had a beagle that was his hunting dog that stayed in the backyard, not a chain. It was like a 20-foot chain, so it wasn't like a 2-foot chain like here. But it's something you don't think about. I'd go out and pet the dog and everything, but eventually we gave the dog away, and they made it a house dog, and it was the nicest dog in the world, right? But it was one that when it's your hunting dog, you don't make it your closest friend, right? And I'd forgotten all about that until I read the book, and I'm like, wow, I've kind of lived through something similar to that. And yeah, I regret the idea that I didn't play it more with the dog, right? Because it had a different life than it could have had for so long, even though it was,
it's just old traditions,
Mhm.
people treat dogs like that. And that's why, I'm doing that in the strip and keeping them tied up for so long. I'm hoping that there was a dog or two that might have gotten brought into the house because of it,
Exactly. And you're right. It was a different time. I mean, my grandparents, same thing, right? I mean, the dogs were always outside, usually in a pen, maybe not chained up, but something. And and that's something I'd ever thought about until I read your book. And now I have a lot of regrets now growing up because I ended up being a cat person, even though I had dogs around me more than I had cats. I don't know why, right? But it's just that they weren't treated as if they were part of the family, which is unfortunate. Yeah. I'll tell you, I see that today. I remember I mentioned to you, I live in Central Florida. I live near a national forest. People drop their dogs out here and leave all the time. It's crazy. Seeing that, I mean, I've only been down here for 2 years, but I've seen at least a dozen dogs where they're moving, they don't need them anymore. They just take them to the edge of the woods and they let them go, and they drive away. And then since we live here, we're the left, calling the animal protection and having them come out and pick them up and, hopefully relocate them. But you just never know. It's shocking. I mean, I never saw that when I lived in Ohio, but just by where I live here now, I've seen it far too often.
Yeah, no, it's so horrible how humans are, how they treat animals. It's getting better, but there's still so much to do. In the book, we have real stories with real photographs of people's dogs that had that life and now have a new life. And we also have different organizations you could get in touch with, to help. So, that with MUTTS, for me, it's trying to help people become more passionate and empathetic, especially to animals.
And you've you kind of put a lot of your own personal time into sitting on boards that are a benefit to pets, the Humane Society, I think, and maybe a few others, right? The Fund for Animals, I think, was one of the names.
Yeah, I've been on those boards for many years. And you know, with our website, we work with a lot of shelters and animal groups trying to, you know, the good thing for all those people that treat animals badly, there's so many saints who spend their whole lives treating animals well and trying to do their best. You know, God, I've been blessed. I did a children's book about Jane Goodall and got to meet Jane, and boy,
Oh, wow.
there's the saint. I mean, she spends 300 days of the year traveling, you know, promoting, you know, her message of trying to save this planet and the animals who live on it. So yeah, I've been blessed. I tell you, I get to hang around with the coolest people, comic artists and animal people. So people with good hearts.
Exactly.
Both trying to make the world a nicer place. You know?
Lyle was curious if any of the proceeds of the book go towards animal care, protection groups, those sorts of things.
On our website, a portion of the money goes to different animal groups.
Yeah. There you go. And that's at mutts.com. And again, it's linked in the description, everybody. So you can check it out after the show or during the show. And yeah, I would, well, but it's on back order right now, right? As far as at least through your store.
That was the good news, bad news. The good news was it became a national bestseller, and the bad news, they didn't print enough. So it's coming out, I think, in another week or so. The second printing will be out. So, and if you get it on the website, you get a signed copy.
Oh, nice. Well, I'll have to pick one up. So you can actually order it, and it'll just be on back order, and you'll ship them when you get it.
Yeah. As soon as it comes out, you'll get it that day. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, I mean, you know, how long do you see Mutts lasting?
Well, you know, Peanuts went for 50 years.
It did.
And I just celebrated my 30th anniversary, September 5th. You know, that's one thing about comic strips compared to other art forms. They last a long time, you know. So who knows how long it's going to last? I guess it depends on how long newspapers, how long they're going to last. And, I mean, there's always, you know, again, you can see it online, you know, from mutts.com. You could actually have it delivered to your email every day. Mm-hmm. But as far as newspapers go, who knows how long that's going to be.
Exactly. Yeah, that is it's always been a question mark. But you know, I think it was a question mark 20 years ago, and they're still around. But yeah, you just never know. We have that same conversation about comics and traditional art versus digital art, all of that stuff. Everything's changing. I mean, who knows? You know, in 100 years, it's not going to be the same. When is that turning point going to happen? I don't know. But yeah, we can at least be happy with what we have today, because and as weird as it is, it hasn't changed a whole lot in 100 years. So yeah.
People are always going to want stories with words and pictures. I mean, it'd be different mediums, but I think people love stories, and you know, it's how we learn. And you know, with Mutts, besides the strip, I also do picture books. So actually, next year I have 2 Mutts picture books coming out. The first one I did was called The Gift of Nothing, and that celebrated its 20th anniversary next year. So they're reissuing an anniversary edition of that. And in honor of that book, I did a companion piece called The Gift of Everything, starring Earl and Mooch. So there'll be two children Mutts books next year.
Very nice. So I assume there's a mailing list that people can sign up for over at your website as well to get updated.
Yeah. They'll keep you posted what's going on. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I mean, and I have to ask, I mean, do you ever sell your originals? I mean, could a person actually get a Mutts? Because I know I've seen a few in charity auctions, and I know they sell incredibly well. But you know, if a collector out there wanted to get a piece, you know, would they just have to find somebody who might be selling a piece like that got out there from something you donated to?
I haven't really sold any like dailies or Sundays, but I do put them in auctions, usually animal auctions. So
yeah,
they do come up, And for this particular, I mean, we'll talk about it later, but I have a show in Princeton.
Yep.
This month. I'm in the gallery right now. That's why you see these paintings behind me. But the top floor is going to be my superhero journey paintings. But the bottom floor, I'm selling hand-colored prints of the guard dog story. So I, watercolored a print, and then I added an original drawing on those. So those will be for sale for anybody. And some of the money is going to the local Princeton shelter, Save.
Good. And I mentioned board of directors earlier. I don't know if you're on currently, but you did the Charles Schulz Museum board of directors too. I mean, what a way to give back to a creator that meant a lot to you.
No, it's a privilege. I've been on the Charles M. Schulz board, God, since I think the beginning, for many years, and it's always a treat to go there for the board meetings. And it's a beautiful museum. If you haven't been to the museum, my God, it's the perfect.
I haven't. I've run a lot of press releases for them. I've looked at a lot of photos, but I've never gotten to go there. But I really want to.
It's worth going to. It's a perfect little museum. It's as good as Peanuts. It really, it's just the right size and just filled with all the Peanuts love you can imagine. It's a great. If you're ever in Santa Rosa, it's definitely worth going to.
It's on my bucket list. There are not enough museums, dedicated to the narrative arts, right? I mean, there just isn't. You have the Billy Ireland Museum in Columbus, where you can see a lot of strip art that numerous artists have donated their work to. But yeah, it's not enough. Not enough. And not all of us can go to the Library of Congress to see pieces there. But yeah, no, the Charles Schulz Museum is definitely on my list. Norman Rockwell Museum. I've never been to that. I've always wanted to go see that. I mean, I can't imagine how cool that would be, and I've never done it.
Yeah, I just went to the Billy Ireland Museum like 2 weeks ago because they had that Ernie Bushmiller Nancy show.
Mm-hmm.
They had a Nancy Fest that unfortunately I was sick and couldn't make the festival, but I wanted to go see the show. What a great show!
Well, they again, we're fortunate to have them out there. I took a group there a couple of years ago on a tour, and everybody was just blown away. I mean, because they love to have people who love the medium come there. They'll spread all the artwork on all the tables, anything you want, or you can just go in and just say, give them an era of what you'd like to see, and 24 or 48 hours notice, and they'll have it all set out for you when you go there. I mean, there's just nothing else out there like that. It's a resource like that. So yeah, I mean, we're lucky to have it. So why don't we talk a little bit about the exhibit here? I mean, this is actually when I first got contacted, it was about this exhibition that was related to the superhero's journey book that you put out. And I can show I know I've got a graphic for that as well. Where was that? Right here. That's the cover and one of the interior illustrations. But tell me a bit about the evolution of this, because I think if I had to guess, it has a little bit to do with your love for comics, and in particular Jack Kirby, which kind of goes back to your love for Harriman and Schulz and the creators who came before you. But what inspired you to put this book together?
Well, it's funny. I know this is going to sound crazy because every time I say it sounds crazy. But I had just finished a book with the Dalai Lama about the environment called Heart to Heart. And I was trying to figure out, what do you do? What do you do after that? How do you follow up on a book with the Dalai Lama? And a great editor, my great editor, Charles Kochman at Abrams, it stopped by one day and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a book with the Marvel superheroes. That he was going to start a new line with Alex Ross called Marvel Arts. And boy, I took about 2 seconds to say yes, because I grew up with those. I'm old enough to have lived when those things were being, coming alive. I was there for those early Fantastic Fours and X-Men and Spider-Mans, and it was such a big part of my childhood. And maybe you don't see it in MUTTS, but definitely an inspiration for me to become an artist and tell stories. Jack Kirby in particular, I just love. I think he's the greatest. He just an imagination unlike anyone else when you think of how many things he invented. So I was all psyched to do a book about Marvel. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I went into it saying a big influence was the Fantastic Four annual where Reed Richards and Sue Storm got married.
Of course.
You know, that was the issue, that every villain and every character you could possibly put in one comic. And when we were kids and that came out, that was the greatest comic in the world. So I was trying to come up with a story that I could draw as many of the superheroes as I could. And I wanted to watch her. You know, this book's funny. I pretty much only read comic books and spiritual books. So this book's a very strange combination of spirituality and Marvel comics, which, you know, when you read those early comics, I mean, Jack Kirby in particular, I think had a real strong spiritual vein throughout all of his work. I mean, the New Gods is, you know, amazing. So, you know, so that's where I started. And actually where I started was a quote from Jack. And the quote was an interviewer asked him, if it's right there, Jack Kirby was once asked if you could have any one superpower, what would it be? And his answer, love. And so that quote and the quote that ends the book were the two things that initiated the story idea for me. And it's a weird combination of my art combined with the actual panels and pages from those 60s comics. And, you know, I think I only removed one or two words and hardly changed any art at all. So it's their comics are true to their comics, and was able to figure out a way to combine my story with their stories. And I have to tell you, it was definitely the most fun book I ever worked on.
Yeah, because you kind of just got to relive your past and your love for the medium and a group of characters that meant a lot to you. I mean, I grew up a Marvel kid too. I've never been much of a DC fan, only because the books weren't around. But Marvel meant a lot to me as well. You know, I mean, but I think it really shows through here in your treatment of the work. Not only, you know, keeping some of the original stories, you know, in the pages together like that. I thought that was a great touch. But you know, but just sprinkling in a really good story. You know, the Watcher and Reed Richards and the you know, the Watcher's never supposed to influence, but you know that he you know how much he wants to, and he still does at the end of the day. But I mean, it's such a wonderful story. I really enjoyed it a lot, Patrick.
Thanks. It was my love letter to all those great, you know, Ditko, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, all those comics that meant so much to me. And it was just so much fun to play with those characters, how powerful they are. And yeah, it's, again, the most fun book I ever did. And, you know, speaking of COVID again, you know, for artists, COVID was a little bit of a blessing because, believe it or not, because it gave me more time to do other work. So that's when I really started painting again. Mm-hmm. And I started painting Marvel characters, and quite a few of the paintings that I did just for myself ended up working in this story. So, you know, it's a combination of my drawings, which, you know, again, I didn't do any pencils. I wanted to draw with the feeling I had when I was a kid. Because when you were a kid, you just drew. You didn't criticize it, and you didn't pencil first and then ink or whatever. You just drew. So that was my, you know, attempt at drawing this book the way I would draw it if I was 10 years old. So it definitely has a unique, but, you know, like, look at this page, or any of the pages. It's just funny how I think it works, how my little crude drawings next to
No, it does. I mean, I'll go back to that one because I know you're going to talk about it again. You're sampling something from the story and then putting, you know, your own art in it and making it work together. And it just does. I mean, because it grounds us in the books, the things that we're used to seeing, you know, that tangible element of reading a comic book, seeing the panels there published, but then having your artwork around it and figuring out the best way to do that. I mean, I don't remember this particular page from Spider-Man. I mean, those panels might have been at the bottom of the page for all I remember, but you know, but it works exactly the way you've done it here, and that's what's so interesting and cool about it. I mean, when people think about you know, writing the history of Marvel and things, you're really telling that through telling a story about the characters. And I don't know. Again, I read through it twice because I really did enjoy it on a lot of different levels. And so I think your approach to this was wonderful. It was refreshing, and I'm going to probably read it a third time. I mean, I really just thoroughly enjoyed it.
But thank you so much. I think the reason the art works for two reasons. One, Ditko, Kirby, and those guys back then had a little more of a cartoony feel. Like comics got very more realistic and illustrative, like when Neil Adams came along. But those Kirby Ditko pages have a little more of that cartoony comic strip feel to them. So I think my drawings worked well. And then the other thing is just the power of the costume. I think, anybody drawing Spider-Man, as long as it looks like Spider-Man, you believe that Spider-Man and you follow the story no matter what he looks like. So this is one of the paintings in the book, yeah. And I really enjoy doing these paintings.
Well, I had no idea the scale of these, but obviously you can see them behind you, which is, I mean, are they all at that? I mean, I don't know what the size of those are, but I'm guessing they're bigger than 2 foot on the shortest side.
It's funny, as a comics, I'm not only, my dailies are so small, I draw really small, and original MUTTS dailies like 3.5 inches by 9 inches. So,
oh, wow.
And so I work really small. So it's so much fun for me. These paintings are pretty much 5-6 feet tall. And it's just fun to work that scale. And the Jack Kirby and those characters work great at that scale.
That's amazing. I mean, had you worked at that scale before for anything? I mean, have you always have you been a closet painter that nobody knew about while you're doing the strips, and you actually have a studio full of 4 by 6 foot paintings that nobody knows about?
I went to art school in New York City, and I took illustration classes and cartooning class. Actually, I had Will Eisner as a teacher. But I also took painting classes. And early on, when I was an illustrator, I used to paint on the side, but just really big abstract paintings. Nothing figurative, just abstract. And these are a combination of my love for abstract art, but also my love for the superheroes. So it's a combination of those two. When I started MUTTS, there was no time to paint anymore. So I went a good 20-something years without painting. But again, when I started painting right before COVID, and when COVID hit, also there was time to paint. So, and now I paint all the time. It's my favorite thing to do.
Well, congratulations. I mean, I went to art school. I actually got accepted to the School of Visual Arts, but coming from Northeast Ohio, I was intimidated to go live at the YMCA for my first year. So I ended up going to an art school near Boston. But I regret that decision. I think I would have been on a very different path, because the School of Visual Arts has always had a strong illustration component to it, with a lot of comics and narrative, artists as educators, there. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to go there, but I just couldn't do it. I was scared to death of New York City in 1985, I think was when I made my tour of the place. And New York City was a tough town in 1985.
Yeah, well, I was there in the late 70s, was even tougher than.
Exactly. Well, you're still here. I guess I shouldn't have been such a wimp.
But it was a lot of fun. When I was there, Harvey Kurtzman of Mad Magazine was teaching.
Wow, that's incredible.
Will Eisner was teaching, and one of my favorite teachers and people of all time is, do you know Jerry Moriarty's work from Raw Magazine?
I do, yeah.
Survives. He was a really good friend and teacher. And so, yeah, there's a lot of exciting people. Do you know the artist Joe Coleman?
The name's familiar. I probably would recognize the work if I saw it.
Yeah, Matt, he was a friend, and still a friend and a fellow student. So, it was a fun place to be, that's for sure.
Wow. Well, I'm envious of that, but no, I mean, well, so the thing is, this has afforded you the opportunity to work, to paint and to work on a larger scale. Again, that's got to be refreshing after, 30 years of working on a 3.5 by 9 inch. I mean, that's actually small for strip standards. At the I think most of the illustrators in the 70s and 80s were working on at least double that, maybe like 6-inch tall by sometimes even up to 16 inches, as a length. So you cut that in half.
Yeah, no, and I was happy to see that Calvin and Hobbes originals are pretty small too. So I'm in good company drawing small.
So yeah, I would assume when you were at the Billy Ireland, you got to check out a few Watersons while you were there, right?
Yeah, of course.
You can't not. I mean, I know they always have some hanging up, but
The place has
yeah, they have the lion's share of Watterson's works there, but yeah, just another reason to go there. But but yeah, no, I had no idea the scale when I was looking at these and knowing seeing how they were printed in the book. I just assumed they were all 11 by 17 ish standard, something around there, 12 by 16. I would never have guessed that you're working at the scale. So now the exhibition makes even more sense. I mean, it needed to be shown in a gallery format. So how did the gallery show happen? Based on your work for this book.
Well, it's the Art Council of Princeton on Witherspoon Street in Princeton, New Jersey. I live in Princeton, New Jersey, and Charles Vieira is the curator, and he teaches here. And he knew of my work and asked if I'd like to have a show. And I was, they just pile up in my studio. I don't really do anything with them. It's nice.
That's good.
It's nice to get them out in the world, and boy, to see them in one, obviously my studio is not the size of this gallery, so to see them all in one space hung together, it's really nice. If I do say so, it's a really fun show. I think anyone could come out to it will enjoy it. You're surrounded by Marvel friends.
Exactly. No, I mean, I think that's fantastic. Charles was the one who reached out to me originally about a month ago, letting me know that the show was happening. And so the gallery, so the exhibition is open right now, right? It's at the Paul Robeson Center for the Arts. But yeah,
it actually opens this Saturday, November 9th. And then there's going to be like an official opening reception next Saturday, the 16th, from 3 to 5. And of course, I'll be here. And then on November 30th, at 3 o'clock again, there's going to be a talk, and I'll talk. And the show's interesting. Like the first floor is all the giant superhero paintings, but then on the bottom floor of the gallery, we're showing hand watercolored guard dog prints. Mm-hmm. Those would be for purchase. And I did a little original drawing on each print. So it actually celebrates the two books. And we'll be selling both books signed here too. The guard dog book and the superheroes journey book. So it's
you saved it for the exhibition. That's a good thing. That's exciting, though. I mean, have you ever had an exhibition of of MUTTS work anywhere, or on a similar scale?
I actually, speaking of Ohio and the Billy Ireland Museum, Jenny Robb, who runs the gallery there, she saw my paintings and wanted to do a show, but the Ohio State University actually has another gallery space in town in Columbus that was huge. It's like the size of the Whitney Museum in New York City. And they actually did a show during COVID, just when COVID was ending. They did a show of 56 of my paintings. So, some of them were superhero, but I also do paintings of I did a lot of Nancy and Sluggo paintings and Happy Hooligan paintings and even Earl and Mooch paintings. So I did a show of 56 paintings. So, but that was before the superhero journey. This show in Princeton is just the superhero paintings.
Wow, that's cool. Well, there should be another exhibition somewhere in your future for the MUTTS illustration work, but at least for now you get to have this amazing gallery exhibit. And I know that here was I don't know if I should read it or not. This is the quote from Jack Kirby that you ended the book with, and it is very very poignant. I mean, there's a reason why Jack Kirby was loved by all of his fellow creators and his fans, because he was so down to earth, I think, and very relatable. And you had a guy who's left a legacy on comics that no one will ever match, right? But his background, being in World War II, and having read a few biographies about him. I mean, he was a very interesting man. So the quote you have here at the end, he says, "I had a guy die on me once during the war, and he looked up at me and he said, 'What the hell happened? What happened?'" And here I was, just a schmo from the east side of New York City, you know, and how do you answer the guy? I told him, you happened. See? And that was real. It got me to think how valuable human beings are. And at that moment, I discovered my own humanity. In that moment, I discovered everybody else's. And I mean, it gives me chills just reading it. You know, and I've read this quote 4 or 5 times for the show. It just tells you a lot about Jack Kirby and, you know, what an incredible human being he was. Not just an incredibly talented man, but just so very special. And we were very blessed to have him be a part of something that, you know, has been so influential in all of our lives. I mean, the idea that comics has been so fortunate to have creators like Jack and Ditko, you know, leave their marks and be such incredible human beings at the same time. So we're just so fortunate.
Yeah, Jack gave so much to the world. And when the first time I read that quote, I said, I need to do something with that quote, and it inspired the book. Yeah.
Well, that's
powerful stuff. Would you like me to do a little favor?
I was just going to say, before we have to go, if you don't mind, I know you have the iPad there. If you could do a little walk around, I'd enjoy seeing it. I'll switch to full screen so we can get a better look at you know, how everything is set up there at the gallery.
I'll do a little walk. I guess I'm not going to see it, so you're going to have to tell me if I'm holding the guy correctly. Okay, so here we go. How's that? Well, maybe I move back a little bit.
Yeah, I would take a couple steps away from the wall.
So that's
So they're on canvas too.
yeah. No, that one there is 6 feet. This one, if you're seeing it, that's actually from the book.
Yes. We showed that one a little bit earlier, and that's got comic pages on it too, right? So you're actually sticking to a tradition that Jack was very fond of, which was you know, kind of collaging pieces sometimes into his works. But
His collage work's amazing. I have to step back for this one. This is probably the biggest painting in the show. It's called Hulk's Happy Place. Walk around. That's another big one. It's got the
surfer,
the little silver surfer. And here's a painting that's in the book, but I only used one panel. It's a triptych. In the book, it's just the middle panel, but it's this is the biggest painting in the show. And then I wanted to show you that in the downstairs gallery will be these guard dog prints that I hand watercolored and added a little drawing to. How are these looking? I really can't tell if I'm
yeah. No, it's yeah, the lighting is a little stark, but that has nothing to do with you. You know, you've got everything framed perfect. Thank you. That's a great space.
Yeah, it's a great space and a real fun show. So again, that's the whole month of November going to December 7th. That's the Art Council of Princeton. If you Google Art Council of Princeton, you'll get all the information you need.
That's true. Yeah, I was just always Googling Patrick McDonnell's superhero exhibit, and it would come up. But I'm pretty sure I put the link to the exhibit in the show description as well. A link over to MUTTS, and yeah, no, this is so. Yeah, it's been busy for you, Patrick. I think this is great. I mean, do you think you're going to do it? Is this your one and done Marvel book though? I mean, do you think you have anything else in there?
Oh, I have to tell you again, that was the most fun book I ever did, and yeah, I'd love to do another Marvel book. I don't know what the story would be, but you know, the craziest thing, you know, I grew up with 2 brothers, and my older brother, when we were reading these comics as a kid, he decided who collected what. So he gave me the X-Men. He didn't like the X-Men, so he gave me the X-Men. So growing up, the X-Men were my favorite. And I did this book, and I couldn't find a place to put the X-Men in. So I feel bad about that. So
well, I do too, because I mean, the X-Men were my favorite book too, along with Thor. But But yeah, everybody knows X-Men is my favorite title. So that's too bad. I was hoping I'd see somebody from X-Men pop in there, right? Even just Professor X, maybe. But it's okay. So maybe there should be a second book somewhere.
And I did, for such a spiritual book, I didn't get Doctor Strange in there either. So I definitely need to do another book.
Yeah, that's true. That is kind of odd. Yeah, you're right. He would have fit very well into the storyline.
Yeah.
But that gives us reason.
I think he would have took over. And I tell you the truth, I would have never thought that Reed Richards was going to be the major character. But just the way I knew I wanted the Watcher because I just loved the Watcher character, and I thought he would, be a good pivotal part of the story. So then, if you have the Watcher, you have to have Reed Richards in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. I mean, and again, it was just great the way you were able to introduce so many characters through there. With Iron Man, like you saw in Spider-Man, FF, it just worked really well with the Watcher kind of being the conduit to give everybody their introductions to each of those characters' storylines. Well, Patrick, I think we've hit our hour here, but I'll tell you, this was a lot of fun. And if there's, if you ever have anything that I can, promote for you, I'm always happy to do it. And we should try to, maybe if I can ever do another roundtable about, maybe we should do a roundtable about Charles Schulz sometimes. I mean, everybody knows a lot about him, but again, you knew him. So maybe that might be fun.
I would love to do that. And at the San Diego Comic-Con, we did a panel on the superhero's journey, but it really became a panel about Jack Kirby with Glenn Gould and Charles Hatfield, and that was a lot of fun. So I'd be happy to do a panel anytime. So please think of me when you make that happen. I think it's a great idea.
I will definitely do that. Well, I appreciate you taking the time this afternoon. Again, it's congratulations on the exhibit, the success of the Guard Dog book. I mean, those. Again, it's a good time to be Patrick McDonnell, but I bet you have some strip work you need to get back to or something. But again, I appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me today, and I really enjoyed getting the chance to talk with you again.
So much. It was a lot of fun.
All right, so everybody who hung out with us live, we appreciate it, and I appreciate your time this afternoon. I encourage you to go over to MUTTS.com, pick and back order the Guard Dog book, and also please check out the Marvel book as well, because it is a very good read, and I think everybody who's a fan of Marvel and comics in general will really appreciate it. I definitely enjoyed it, and I'm going to read it again before I'm done here today. So have a great day, and we'll talk to you.